From the Pasadena Media Center, good evening and welcome to tonight's edition of Arroyo Live. I'm Joe Carbonetta. This program is produced by Pasadena Media to help enrich our community through informative and meaningful conversation. You can share your questions or comments with us anytime at arroyolive@pasadenamedia.org. Each year, on April 22nd, billions of people from across the globe symbolically come together in celebration of a day marking the anniversary of what many consider to be the birth of the modern environmental movement. Begun in 1970, Earth Day was conceived to provide a voice to an emerging environmental consciousness and to provide a platform to make environmental concerns front-page news. Tonight, we take a fresh look at this modern movement, its current global status, and the continuing challenges of sharing a message that not everyone wants to hear. Join me for this week's Arroyo Live. I'm joined this evening by Citizens Climate Lobby Foothill Chapter founder, Mr. Robert Haw, Community 2.0 CEO, Mr. Greg Apodaca, and Ms. Wen Lee, Engagement Director at republicen.org. Thank you all for joining me this evening. It's a pleasure to have you here. I'm going to take a moment now to put each of you on the spot and have you tell our viewers at home a little bit more about your background. Greg, if it's all right, let's begin with you.
Sure. My name is Greg Apodaca. I'm founder of Community 2.0. We're really a startup. We're just taking our profile into the community. Basically, I'm a concerned citizen, passionate about community building, have been building community here in the Pasadena area for probably 30 years, maybe 35 years. And my expertise is in community building, managing collaboration. Recently, talking to some climate activists in town, it was said that the elephant in the room is that we need monumental change to address the climate emergency. And how in the heck are we going to do that? So my expertise is in bringing people together, creating opportunities for synergy, building trust, and then applying exponential technologies to accelerate the impact that we can have on the climate emergency. Glad to be here.
Sounds like an awful lot of work. Wen, can we go to you now?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on. My name is Wen Lee, and I live in Pasadena. I've worked in the climate nonprofit world for over 10 years, and I currently work at republicen.org, which works specifically with conservatives who care about climate change and really activating them to speak up and to let their elected leaders know that this is an issue that's important to them. And personally, I am also very passionate about living a sustainable lifestyle with low carbon footprint. My husband and I recently retrofitted our house, not this one, but our previous house, to be a zero net energy house, fully powered by solar panels, 100% electric. And so this is an issue that's very important to me, both professionally and personally.
Well, and again, thank you for joining us this evening. And Robert, last but not least, would you please tell our viewers at home a little about yourself?
Yeah, hi. Thanks so much for having me on. So Robert Haw is my name. I'm a longtime engineer at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And I've spent many years working in the earth science part of the lab. So looking at working on Earth orbiters that are examining, looking down at Earth and just seeing what's going on. So one of the outcomes of all that was that I did some reading on climate scientists, and I first learned about global warming through readings from James Hansen. So this is way back in the late 80s when he first raised that issue in Congress. So I've been active trying to do what I can in the climate area since the early 90s. And maybe 10, 11 years ago, I founded the Pasadena chapter, as was said in the introduction of the Pasadena Foothills chapter of the Citizens Climate Lobby. So this is a national organization that is endeavoring to pass really strong climate legislation through Congress. And I guess I would say my expertise then is as a citizen lobbyist. So I have, our chapter has been very successful at inducing our local members of Congress to co-sponsor these bills that are very strong and will make a big difference in the climate if we can get these things passed. So I think that's kind of a quick background about me.
Well, certainly since its inception, Earth Day has presented a great many challenges for those involved, certainly bringing the message of such importance across the globe really is quite a bit of work and not always so well or easily received. I'd like to start out by asking each of you in turn what Earth Day means to each of you. And Robert, I guess we're going to go back the way we came. So I'd like to pose that question to you first this time.
Sure. I think it's a time to reflect, take a moment from our busy lives and just reflect at our place on this planet. We're a sentient being, a sentient species. It's supposed to be so smart. So I think we should just think about our place on this planet, which is, think of it as a spaceship. I mean, that's really what Earth is. It's a spaceship in the middle of a hostile void. I mean, we have to preserve this for our children. Many people have used these comparisons before, but it's also for our own well-being. There is no planet B, so we really have to think that through seriously.
Right. When I know you started to touch on that in your introduction, in fact, mentioning the importance of moving your household to a low carbon footprint. But perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about what Earth Day means to you.
Sure, yeah. I agree with everything Rob just said. And the saying is that every day is Earth Day because it's not just like one day out of the year where it matters. But it is good to have a holiday where we intentionally reflect and think about where human society's role is on this planet. And I remember when I was maybe about 19 or 20, that's when I first became aware about the impact that human civilization makes on the earth. And it was very shocking to me that like, wow, I'm just living my life. And actually the way I live has an impact on people living in other countries and animals in the rainforest and fish in the sea and the air we breathe and everything. And it made me realize, oh my gosh, like we need to like be more thoughtful and be more knowledgeable about the impacts of our lifestyle. And that's kind of how it started for me. And so Earth Day has always been a special day to me because it's a recognition that this is an important thing for us to all think about and to consider. And like people say, every day should be Earth Day, but at least this is one day when the whole country can stop and really celebrate this gorgeous and precious planet that we have and the only one we have.
All right, thank you for that. Greg, of course, same question to you.
Sure, it's for me, it's an opportunity to refocus on the climate emergency, and it's an extra incentive for me, I think, and for everybody to work together. This is a global issue, and there's no way that any of us individually or even individual nations can tackle it on their own. It's an event where the world can come together. We can be a community of local communities as a global community. And that's really our mission is to reach out to folks who are kindred spirits around the world and see what we can do together. In particular, and I'm on a regular basis now, probably most of us are Zooming to meetings with folks in Brazil and the Netherlands and London and as far away as New Jersey even, and able to find resources out there and interest and ideas that we couldn't have done, maybe 10 or 20 years ago when it wasn't so easy on the internet or wasn't so mandated by Zoom. And so it's a real opportunity for us to come together and making my life better, I think.
All right. Well, the Earth Day idea had a humble beginning here in the United States in 1970, but has since grown to a global movement. But I want to start out by discussing how effectual the movement is here in the United States. I was wondering if anyone on the panel here this evening had some information about how effective or how receptive the American public is at this day and age when it comes to Earth Day.
Well, I think I would just say that I remember when Earth Day, I don't remember because I wasn't around, but hearing about the first Earth Day and how it was really a huge movement where millions and millions of people showed up. And it's because the waters were so polluted and the air was so bad and people had finally had enough. It was a very inspiring moment in our history. And since then, I think the environmental movement has changed quite a bit. But to answer your question, I think most recently, the issue of climate change has become much more mainstream, if you will. It's an issue that everyday people are starting to be aware of and to really be concerned about. I remember 10 or 20 years ago, climate change and global warming was not really something that was widely understood or people were concerned about. But now, when you look at the polls of the American public and how they feel about this issue, even among Republicans, the majority are concerned about climate change, say that it's happening and that they want the government to do something about it. And so you really know that things have changed when the majority of the American public, including conservatives, want to take action on this. And so I'm actually quite hopeful because I feel like change is happening, it's accelerating, and we are moving towards addressing this very important issue. And the sooner the better, because we should have done something 20 years ago. But it's really changing now, and it's very exciting and hopeful for me.
Well, when keeping things within the United States for just this moment, you mentioned that the Republicans as well as the Democrats are in agreement that more needs to be done. California is seen largely as a pioneer in the United States when it comes to environmental initiatives, sort of leading the way for the rest of the country to follow in green initiatives and the like. How is the rest of the country doing in terms of following California's lead? And again, I do open this up to everyone here on the panel.
Well, I think the rest of the country is lagging behind California, with some notable exceptions, of course. California has always been a leader in many social actions and pathways, but even California, I think, is superficially leading the pack. But what California has done, and what many other states are doing, is they're very willing to adopt green measures, kind of green with quotes around it, but they're not willing to reduce the emissions side of the equation. So it's kind of a two-edged sword. Not only do we have to adopt, say, solar and wind power, clean energy, but we also have to reduce our legacy energy sources. And I see California has been very willing to adopt the clean energy, but not so willing to reduce the fossil emissions. And so I think that's the same, that pattern is seen across the rest of the country. And so California isn't really setting the best kind of an example.
It's interesting, though, in the media, so often California is painted as an island that is less business friendly than the rest of the country. And in so doing, often hurts the economic output of the rest of the country. To that, what do any of you have to say?
Well, I mean, California continues to be a strong engine in the economy. I mean, there may be a lot of spin put on how California laws are damaging the economy in some vague way, but California continues to be a leader in the economy. I mean, it's fifth. Not sure what the number is now. It's fifth or sixth largest economy in the world, and continues to be in that place. A lot of clean energy companies and such like are emerging in California. So these are all strong contenders for the new economy, which is going to be based on clean energy.
Well,
And I do think that in talking about how other states are doing versus California, I mean, it's the shifting attitudes on addressing climate change and the environment in general is a shift that's happening nationwide. It's maybe faster in California in terms of our government, but government is not the only way that the change is happening. It's not just through policy. Like if you think to like 15 years ago, like which companies were using environmental things in their commercials, right? Like how many electric and hybrids did you see on the road? Like things have changed so much, and even the big companies now, big industry, and even the oil industry lobby, API, has now endorsed a carbon tax. Like there's a shift in how people are thinking about climate change. There's much more willingness to act, even among industry, among corporations. And as the industry changes, that also changes the shape of our country in every state. So even if some states' governments are maybe lagging behind California, there are other changes that are happening in the private sector that are making a big difference.
Yeah, I would like to just say that I agree with Gwen. And I don't know that it serves us to break things down state by state. I think really more of an issue for us, at least the way that our approach is that there are early adopters in every state. There are early adopters in every country. Some people are lobbying and making a lot of noise about the fact that this is an emergency and that we need to address it. And I think as with any other issue, there are going to be people who are early on the bandwagon and say, yeah, let's do this. And I don't think California has a market cornered on early adopters. I think they're all over the world, and that's why we're reaching out all over the world. It's important that those of us who are early adopters, who will state in writing that this is an emergency and we need to take emergency actions as if our house was on fire, to quote Greta Thunberg, we should be acting much more forcefully. And those of us who are willing to do that need to work together to leverage resources and leverage ideas, and to bring a concerted effort to the media and to elected officials and business leaders and saying, hey, we can't afford not to address this as an emergency anymore. The UN IPCC report in 2018 made it very clear we have about 12 years left before irreversible damage. Of course, those numbers are debatable and should be discussed. But the time is near when things are going to be dramatically different, and we've already started to see the impact of extreme weather around the world. So I think really it's more an issue of where are the early adopters and how can we work together to address this instead of trying to break it down state by state.
Yeah, I agree. I think that you brought up the weather, extreme weather events, Greg, and I think that's a really good point. When people see on the news now stories about huge storms and ice storms causing blackouts and heat waves and droughts, and it's I feel like there's always some kind of climate emergency happening that's on the news, and so the general public is really paying attention and really being like, oh, this isn't something that's happening 50 years from now, it's happening right now. And the city is flooded and the city has no power. And as the general public shifts their attitudes, and as private businesses shift their attitudes, as I mentioned before, I mean, the government will follow. And often we think about politicians as leading, but oftentimes politicians are the ones that are following. They will follow where the public is. And what it looks like right now is that the climate awareness, climate action is becoming a very important part for the general American public, not just like, the hippy dippy environmentalists that we think about in Berkeley or something. This is everybody.
You're talking about us tree huggers, right?
Yes.
Well, certainly
I
in,
see.
in recent times we've seen an increase in the stories that you were just talking about when the increase in weather phenomenon. But historically, how challenging has it been to spread the gospel, as it were, of environmental awareness when so often Californians, again in particular, are painted as paying a high price for this environmental awareness and increased energy costs, certainly every year, especially in the summertime when the big oil companies shift their formulas of gasoline from winter to summer. We see a massive increase of gasoline prices, and they blame that on the restrictions that California poses in attempting to make for a cleaner environment. So how challenging is it to uh, keep the movement going about environmental awareness?
Well, I think and I mean, as Greg and Wen alluded to, I think the environmental awareness will come as more damage is caused by weather events. There will be that gradual dawning, but I'm a little less sanguine about this because there is the populace, and then there is the system that's in place politically, and I'm just looking for evidence to see that this shift is underway, and I'm not seeing too much. I mean, in the last federal election, yes, indeed, we did get a climate friendly president elected, but the balance in Congress shifted in the other direction. So when you're looking at how people are actually voting, how the system is set up, the current way we have the votes are tallied, the number of legislators that are being elected that are, let's say, not quite climate advocates hasn't been changing much. Maybe in the last election it even increased somewhat. So this is alarming, and as someone who works in science, I'm just looking for evidence, and I don't see that evidence yet in the political system. It may come, but it may not be soon enough.
You alluded to the current administration. How frustrating was it to have the previous administration who not only refused to acknowledge environmental concerns, but openly mocked them?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I think we reacted the same way many others would have reacted. I mean, I entered a very dark period for a period of 4 years ago under many weeks. I guess we just tried to, we tried to do our best in the last 4 years, like Jerry Brown's effort to say we're still in, and all the other groups. So we've struggled on, for sure. It wasn't a pleasant time.
Well, certainly that administration's efforts probably stalled the climate awareness movement. But would you characterize it as doing damage? Do you think it moved the bar back far enough that you now have to make up ground, or do you just start moving forward again?
Well, go ahead, Greg or Wen.
Yeah, I think the Trump administration did cause damage, all kinds of damage, but specifically with the climate movement, he really started defining what Republicans stand for and what they believe. He became the symbol of the party, and when he, as the leader of the party, is not taking climate change seriously, that affects the voters as well. So that was really unfortunate. I do think that we have some catching up to do, and that we have to make up for some of that damage. And but to sort of respond to what Rob was saying earlier about not seeing evidence that a shift is happening, perhaps I'm more in a bubble because I work directly with conservatives and Republicans who care about climate, but I see lots of evidence every day. There's a lot more, I mean, it's a low bar, right, Rob? I mean, like before, the Republican Party wasn't even acknowledging that climate change was happening. But now we have some like some of the foremost Republican leaders acknowledging climate change is a problem. Not only that, saying it's urgent that we do something, and not only that, but proposing solutions and trying to pass legislation. So I know it's nowhere close to where we need to be, but just compared to where we were 10 years ago, the Republican Party has been shifting. Of course, we need it to go way faster. But one of the most important things that we see at our organization is to really encourage these trailblazers, these Republicans who are sticking their neck out and going against the grain of their party. I'm thinking of Mitt Romney, for example, and really telling them, like, yes, what you're doing is great. We will support you, even if we're even Democrats will support you. Everyone supports you. Please keep going. And we really need to see the Republican Party change their position on this, because we can't solve climate change with just one party. And I think you, with Citizens Climate Lobby, completely understand this, that we need a bipartisan solution. And so if we want a bipartisan solution, we need to bring the Republicans on board. And that means really encouraging all the leaders that we can within that party. But I can also see why you would be frustrated.
Absolutely. I mean, what you're saying is correct, but what you're saying is future tense. And I'm saying, I was just looking at the last election when I thought there would be a much more landslide just for just climate reasons, and there wasn't much of one. And if you know, all else equal, if the average voter is concerned about climate, would they be voting Democrat or Republican? And in many districts, they voted Republican. And so far, I haven't seen evidence of those Republicans that were elected of sticking their neck out in Congress. Yes, in Senate, maybe there are one or two.
Yeah, you know, let me chime in here a little bit. If I'm not mistaken, the last election was won by the largest margin in history. Didn't the Democrats win by about the presidential election by about 7 million votes? More than Trump won the prior time. I think that's the case. And I think unwittingly, Trump might have done the world a favor by ignoring the climate emergency and denying science, in that people looked at him like he's crazy, you know. And I think the youth movement stood up and said, you know, hey, we have to do this. The Sunrise Movement stood up. Greta Thunberg led an international coalition of youth to move to action. I think countries around the world quit thinking, okay, the US is going to be our savior. We need to get up and do something ourselves. Not that they weren't doing anything, but they can't depend on the United States anymore to be the leader and save the planet. So I think all those things are good. And then, in fact, if you look at the business community, Larry Fink, who runs the largest asset management company in the world, I think BlackRock, has been saying for years now that businesses could no longer operate, or should no longer operate, according to the single bottom line of capitalism and profitability. And in fact, now they should have a purpose more than making money, and they should have a sustainability plan, or he's going to quit investing in them. And money talks. And you know, they've lined up one after another, Amazon and Delta and what else? Netflix. There's a long list of companies now who have said, okay, we get it. Youth want to work for companies that care about the environment. Our employees want to hear us say that we're for the environment. People want to buy our products based on whether we're for the environment or not. And so I think Trump is really, it's a shame that for 4 years America wasn't able to take the lead. But I think there's a silver lining to that cloud, and I think the world has stood up stronger than ever against for climate science and for taking action. So I think that's the case.
Well, so far we have discussed how Earth Day and the environmental awareness movement is going on a national level. But now I'd like to broaden the scope a little bit and discuss the international situation. How are we doing as far as environmental awareness and climate change on an international level?
Are you referring to the Paris Agreement, or just individual countries sort of hopscotching around the world?
You know, a little of both. I certainly do want to discuss the Paris Agreement. Obviously, that ties in with the previous administration. But just to begin with, I'm wondering how the world is responding to the idea of climate change and the need for environmental awareness.
There's many countries, and it's changing all the time, but we're it's on the order of 60, maybe more, nations that have already have put a price on carbon. Let's say this is one action of addressing climate change. So it's going to be a rising price on carbon emissions, so that makes fossil fuels more expensive relative to clean energy. So there's quite a few countries that have already adopted those kinds of plans around the world. So there are a number of countries like that. The European Union has a different setup. It's putting a cap on emissions, much like California is doing with its emission trading system. So there's a number of countries that are doing that, and all of them are trying to fit within the Paris Agreement with their, but they're taking these individual actions too.
Okay, well, certainly you bring up the Paris Agreement, and it would be hard to ignore the fact that the previous administration, i.e. President Trump, pulled us out of that agreement, which certainly has to have an effect on the movement in general. His argument for doing this was that the United States is single-handedly trying to turn the tide while the rest of the world sort of sits by and watches, and maybe with the case of some nations, simply thumbs their nose at us. How accurate a statement is that? I mean, certainly you have emerging nations like China that are really polluting quite a bit these days, and other countries as well. And for every one country that is trying to cut greenhouse emissions, there seem to be two or three more that are ramping theirs up. How effective is the Paris Agreement, and was it a good idea to pull out of it? Is it a good idea that Biden is putting us back in it?
You know, I don't think anybody would say it's a bad thing that the Biden administration has re-signed the agreement and is considering, you know, hundreds of billions of dollars in their stimulus for green initiatives. I think all of that is positive. That's going to provide some incentive, since we're the largest market in the world, for other countries to pay attention and say, okay, if the United States is going green, then, you know, if we want to sell them products, we need to fall in line. If we want to do business with them otherwise, we need to fall in line as well. I think all of that's a good thing. And you mentioned, Joe, that the world is not on par with the Paris Agreement goals. And so we need to all up our game here. I think pointing fingers at countries and saying they're the problem and we're the good guys, I think that's the wrong mindset. The mindset is we all need to up our games here. And regardless of where the best solutions are, we need to find them and replicate them. Certainly that's what we hope to do here, our organization, both locally and internationally. We're talking, some of the folks who are involved with us are involved in the Smart Cities Initiative. And there's great ideas around the world and cities around the world, and we need to bring them, and we will, to Pasadena and say, hey, if this city can do this in Bristol, England, or wherever, why can't we do this here? And let's make those things happen.
Well, Greg, you make an interesting point just a moment ago. You said that perhaps the biggest incentive for us to continue leading this charge is that it will force the rest of the world to look at us and say, well, if we want to continue to do business with America, we need to get on the train, as it were. But is that message the message we're really sending, considering we seem to do the largest amount of our business with China, one of the largest nations contributing to the pollution problem? It seems that we have outsourced so many things and have a very, very lopsided trade agreement where we purchase all kinds of goods and services from China and export very little by comparison. And again, while we try so hard to try and improve our emissions, China is running in exactly the opposite direction. So what message are we really sending?
You know, I don't know that that corporate America has really gotten the message yet, and I would certainly not say that that we're doing way better than China. I think China, obviously, as a communist country, is going to be slow to innovate. Although in some areas, I think America has fallen behind China in microelectronics and a lot of internet-based related things. Some of their companies, I forgot the name, is it Alibaba? That's and some of other internet companies are bigger than Amazon, and certainly they are in the lead in some areas because America has neglected to assume the role in green initiatives and in other initiatives. I don't think we should set ourselves up as the country that's doing the best on the green initiatives yet. I think now is the time to start. And again, I think pitting one country against another is the wrong approach. This is a global initiative. We need to work together. We need a global coalition and collaborative efforts. And where China wants to collaborate with us to save the planet in green initiatives, we need to do that. And where they're spoiling the environment, we need to say honestly that they're doing that. But we need to own up to America's failures as well. And I think it had been America's industry that has led the recent industrial revolution that has trashed the planet and fostered and supported unfettered capitalism that have spoiled our waterways and oceans around the world. So I don't think we need to hold ourselves up here and saying we're the good guys and you guys are not. I think those days are gone. I think these arbitrarily drawn state boundaries and even national boundaries are falling quickly, especially in the face of a global epidemic and a global emergency like the climate emergency. And we need to shift our thinking and our mindset and say, hey, this is one people and one planet, and we need to get our act together and work together.
I don't.
Well, one way, Joe,
go ahead.
if I may.
Certainly.
There's just to try and bring this large worldwide collaboration into place. There is one technique, and I'm pretty sure the other panelists are well aware of this method also, and it involves policy, but it would involve what's called a border tax adjustment. The Europeans are already planning on implementing one of this in next year, I believe. So what this is, it's a bit technical, but what you do is you put up a tax on any imports into your country, and you say, well, we have a carbon price in our country, and if you don't have a carbon price in your country, then the goods that we import from you, we're gonna adjust at the border and slap a carbon tax on to our. So there's no incentive for that country, the overseas country, to sell into that market. By trying to undercut, let's say, the European Union's costs, because there'll be a tariff inserted. So that country can then apply a carbon tax in its own country, and then that government gets to keep the carbon tax instead of saying the Europeans. So that's a way to propagate around the world this idea of a carbon price. If you want into our club, you got to pay the membership fee. Otherwise, you'll be kind of left out in the cold, and other people will be getting our imports and not you. So this is seriously being considered now by other countries. I said the European Union. Also, Canada is considering one of these, and that Canada is the biggest market for the outside the U.S. for the U.S. And several other countries. The United Kingdom is considering it. So this is a way for this idea to put a price on carbon, and for us to that way indirectly collaborate with all the nations around the planet.
Yeah, and I agree with Rob. I think that it's a smart policy, and it's really difficult to get the whole world to work together, right? I mean, there's like 200 countries with their own individual governments, and it's hard enough to try to figure out what's going on in California, let alone the United States, let alone the entire world. And as Greg said, we need to have the world work together on this problem. And we have these conferences where countries come together and they talk and they talk and they talk and they talk, and then they try to hash out something. But the most effective way to really bring about change to the whole world is through through economic and policy measures. And so, like Rob was saying, if the United States enacts a price on carbon and says, okay, every time you pollute now with fossil fuels, you have to pay for that pollution instead of spewing it into the air for free, then that fixes things in the US, right? But then if you make a border adjustment, like Rob just explained, and saying, well, China, you don't have a carbon tax. So if you want to, sell things to us, you have to pay a tax to make up for the fact that you don't have a carbon price. Then China's going to be like, whoa, we don't want to do that. Okay, we'll enact the carbon price. And every country wants to get in on the US. And so this is a way to get the whole world to work together without actually sitting down and like signing something. It's just money, right? Money talks, as Greg was saying before. And so that's one way to really try to get the world to work together on a similar policy, is to have smart economic policies like Rob just described, which is called a border adjustment.
Okay. Well, so far we've talked about the movement itself and what appears to be working and what still needs more work. Again, as we mentioned earlier, the Earth Day celebration began in 1970 and really as a way to bring awareness about the environment. I guess the next question that comes to mind is, at this point, it's really about raising awareness and stopping further damage to the environment. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would agree.
I think I just watched a video. I think it was Paul Hawken, who wrote the book Drawdown and the 100 most effective ways to reverse global warming. And one of the thought leaders in that area, and he said, it's not good enough to just stop global warming. We have to reverse it.
Well, and that was going to lead me to the next question. Forgive me for interrupting, but I was going to say or ask, is it possible to reverse the damage that has been done? And how much damage do we need to reverse?
I think it is. I just saw on Apple TV recently, it was the most recent documentary by David Attenborough, the noted environmentalist. And I think it's called The Year the Earth Changed. And because of COVID and because of the reduced shipping and airplane rides and people commuting to business, that pollution has gone down dramatically. And we've all been shown, if there was any doubt in our minds, if we could, change our lives dramatically, well, the COVID pandemic made us change our lives dramatically. I would encourage everybody to watch that documentary. But because less noise pollution in Alaska, they had showed mother whales and their babies that used to have to go lockstep to be able to communicate. We thought it was for safety reasons. No, it was communication because there was so much noise they couldn't hear each other. And without that noise pollution, the mother whale was able to go further away from the baby. And just example after example, that when mankind quit polluting the earth, noise, air pollution, water pollution, that nature has these amazing restorative powers and was able to come back in the examples that they showed. So I think we can reverse it. And I'm looking forward to doing that. That's my goal.
And I'm wondering if anyone else on the panel would like to add to that.
Well, Gwen, you go ahead if you have anything to say.
Oh, well, just what Greg was saying about the pandemic and the impact on the environment. I think it's true that that pollution did go down, but also like the pandemic sucked, right? Like our lives were negatively impacted. People were not happy. The economy shut down. A lot of businesses closed, and so I mean the solution to climate change is not like kill the economy and let's shut everything down. Obviously, I'm sure that's not what you were saying, but when some people are talking about, oh, look how wonderful the pandemic was for the environment, we also have to remember, like, but there was a lot of human suffering, a lot of people died. And so the way to really address climate change is to find a way to address the environmental issues, but without causing a lot of human suffering as well. And the more deliberate we are in making our societal shift, the less likely that we'll encounter some kind of really terrible economic crash or something that's gonna cause a lot of suffering, especially among the poorest people. But Rob, go ahead. I have this leaf blower around my house.
Just one comment, so it's sort of kind of related and maybe just peripherally to that, Joe, is that we have carbon emissions and we're all seeking to shift to clean energy, but in fact, there's already too much carbon dioxide in the air, and the threat of greater methane releases. So one action that will need to be taken is to actually try and draw down carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. So that's one action that can and really needs to be taken, in addition to all the clean energy efforts, is to actually undertake carbon sequestration efforts. And perhaps even, and I'm no fan of these, but there may have to be even geoengineering attempts just to buy us some time to suck more carbon out of the atmosphere, because that's the kind of situation we're in.
Well, moving in that direction, for so many years, technological development is seen as being a major contributor to the destruction of the environment. But more recently, technology is being turned in the direction of helping the environment. Let's talk a little bit about that. I know, Robert, you were just mentioning some of the technologies that may be brought to bear. Can anyone here on the panel give us other ideas about what technology can be used to help us? I mean, certainly there are things like solar panels, and most recently, the governor of California has announced that within 10 years, there's going to be a shift to the sale of only electric vehicles. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah,
Well,
I'll jump in here. I think that the technology piece is not the solution, the silver bullet for climate change, but it's absolutely critical. We need all of the engineers and inventors and scientists and all the smart people to help us shift our economy away from what it's built for currently, which is mostly fossil fuel energy, and to carbon-free sources. And so one example is just like, okay, like what can we do to power our homes, right? And a lot of homes use gas right now. And when we think about transportation, most cars use petroleum. And so we really need technology to be able to redesign our homes and our grid and our vehicles to be able to be run by non-fossil fuel sources. And so like solar panels are great, wind turbines are great, but what happens at night and what happens when the wind doesn't blow? We need to have battery storage in order to make this usable. And so we don't have that yet. We need people to come up with that and to make it affordable. And it's a really critical part of solving climate change. From what I can see, is we need all of the innovation we can get, not just with battery storage, just different energy sources, and perhaps like improving nuclear technology so it's not so dangerous. Perhaps it's improving our electric grid to be able to balance more renewable sources. And of course, like you mentioned, our vehicles need to have an option to not run off of gas. And so technology is super important.
Well, when you just brought up nuclear power, but is that a viable platform in today's society in the wake of disasters like Fukushima? Is the public still receptive to the idea? Certainly, nuclear power generation could go a long way towards solving energy problems, but is the fear too great now?
It's a really hard question to answer. Nuclear brings its own set of problems, and nuclear technology where it is now, I think, is perhaps not acceptable to many people to replace the main source of energy. But what I was saying is, if they could advance nuclear technology to a level where it is safer, more reliable, it could be a way to help us get more carbon-free energy. I'm not like supporting it one way or another, but we need everything right now. Like we need A, B, C, D, E, F, like everything that we can possibly try to do more research and development to. And nuclear could be an option if we can innovate that technology to be safer.
In a very real sense, though, doesn't it pollute almost as much because there's still the problem of storage and disposal of the radioactive byproducts?
Currently, yes. But it's not carbon pollution, right? And if climate change is the issue we are most concerned about, Some people might argue that the risk of this other kind of pollution is worth it so that we don't have carbon pollution. Everyone has different opinions on that. But say what you will about nuclear and its danger, it doesn't produce carbon emissions like fossil fuels.
Okay, that's certainly fair enough, and definitely a topic that deserves further exploration.
I would just like to chime in a bit on this. I'm the technical guy here, but I think the everything Wen said I agree with. We need all of the above, but I think even a bigger part of the solution space is we just need to change our mindset. We need to let me just use a phrase, power down. Okay, we need to learn to get by with using less energy, and I don't mean becoming energy paupers. We just need to be more clever about using our energy, and you know, being a little more parsimonious with it, finding new ways to direct energy in more efficient directions, and maybe not being so wasteful of the energy we are now. So there's a mindset change, which I think is even a bigger issue. If we could get by with half as much energy as we use now, reducing our carbon, then we could go a long ways towards solving this clean emissions problem, because we would only have to generate half as much if we could just reduce the amount that individuals and industry use.
Well, Rob brought up an interesting point there about mindset change, and certainly we've seen in the 4 decades that scientists have been warning us about global warming, a very big yawn and so what from most of the public, and they've gone about their ways. And so it's important for us to shift the mindsets of the world en masse. And they're now, because of technology and exponential technologies like AI, virtual reality, things like that, there's an opportunity now to reach hundreds of millions of people via social media through a tweet or through a post. There are ways, one of the things that we'd like to do is to infuse environmental education into video games. Video games, hundreds of millions of people play video games every day. And how about, why don't we introduce some green initiatives in there and some green education, and even like, I think it was Pokemon Go that had people, if they wanted to rise to the levels of the game, they had to actually put their game down and go out and do something in the public first. Well, why don't we do that with green initiatives? And that's exactly what we're planning to do, to use these, as I think 25 different exponential technologies that are just changing the face of humanity. I mean, literally. You can imagine that how much time we spend on social media these days, and how social media companies are kind of using algorithms to get inside our head about where they want us to focus. Well, we can flip that around and use exponential technologies to help us focus more clearly on the issues that are at hand, including the green initiative. So I think exponential technologies are a big part of what's going to shift the mindset of the people, and what's going to help us to solve some of these climate initiatives as well.
Greg, that sounds like a very interesting solution. When I understand that you have to be leaving us right now, so I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to give us any closing thoughts.
Thanks so much, Joe. Yeah, I do think that climate change is a huge problem. We've just talked about a lot of different ways that we need to address it. I know that it can feel very overwhelming, and I just want to tell people that, you don't have to be knowledgeable about everything about climate change to do something about it. You don't have to understand everything, and you're not responsible for solving it yourself. But everyone has a role to play, and everyone can do something. And so for me, I've decided that I want to work with conservatives and Republicans that care about climate change. And Rob has decided that he wants to work on the policy side, and everyone has decided where their role is. The first step is to care about the issue, to not feel hopeless, and to decide where your strengths are and what you have time for and where your priorities are. But climate change needs all of us to solve it. And I hope that people will check out republicen.org to learn more about our work, and also just start locally, as some people talk about, like, you can think globally but act locally. And there's a lot you can do in Pasadena. There's a lot you can do to reduce waste here and to increase energy efficiency, and also in your own life. But I really want to thank Joe and everyone at Pasadena Media for having me on. And I hope that we continue this conversation. It's really important.
Well, and Ms. Wen Lee, Engagement Director at republicen.org, thank you again for joining us. And we understand you have to go, so you have a wonderful evening.
You as well. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Greg, Robert, before we run out of time, I was hoping that you might tell our audience at home how they can get involved in Earth Day and really moving forward with environmental awareness.
Rob, you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, I think when said it best. I mean, everybody can find something that they can maybe get more involved in and just do one thing. You don't have to be involved everywhere. So there's a number of organizations locally that people can join. These there's a group a group that started in the United Kingdom called Extinction Rebellion. There's a local chapter in Los Angeles. These are people that like to get out and make a lot of noise, march on the streets. They're responsible for, trying to convince the banks to pull their money out of fossil fuel investments. So that's you can just Google XR Los Angeles. That's that particular group. And then there's the Sunrise Movement, which is a big movement of younger people that many of us have heard of, that is responsible for getting a lot of the new, very progressive Congress people elected. So you can look around for that group. And if you're more of a policy wonk and you like to actually talk to politicians, to Congress members, there's a group I'm part of called the Citizens Climate Lobby, all one word. You can just Google that. And we work on trying to build awareness in the community, doing many activities. We write letters, we write op-eds, we speak to people, we give talks. This is all about building the awareness in the populace, so that the politicians who like to follow will pick up on the current feeling amongst the people. So those are a few things that people can do if they're viewers, how they can get involved.
All right, Robert, thank you. Greg, we only have about 30 seconds left. I'm wondering if you have any closing thoughts of your own that you'd like to share?
Sure. People can do a lot individually. Go on our website, gapodaca.com, to find 20 ways to reduce your carbon footprint. Also on our website, you can find our Eco Challenge that has 80 different ways, easy things you can do to make a difference in your community. The main thing I would say is join a movement. While we can have a certain amount of impact individually, a movement like Citizens Climate Lobby or Community 2.0 can have much more impact because we leverage and wield the resources of so many people. So I would say join a movement, get active, get off your couch, and let's save this planet.
All right. Well, Mr. Greg Apodaca, Mr. Robert Hoff, thank you both again for joining us this evening. Also, our deepest thanks to Ms. Wen Lee for being here. We know she had to leave just a little bit early. To our viewers at home, if there are topics you would like to see addressed in our program, you can email them to us at arroyolive@pasadenamedia.org, and we may include them in a future broadcast. Until next time, this has been Arroyo Live. I'm Joe Carbonetta. Thank you for watching, and good night.